YouTube Oz going, the Go Downs is back. So what I did here, I took every single NFL team and I took their single biggest need, in my opinion, and I gave them draft options. Round 1, early day 2, later day 2, and day 3 for that position of need. Some fans of these teams played along, so we'll break those down as we go on, get a different perspective. But the Titans, we actually had to do a little bit differently compared to the other teams in this video because they're going to take Cam Ward 1. So their biggest need is quarterback. And it would have been pretty boring to sit here and go, round 1, Cam Ward, round 2, Jackson Dart, something like that, when they're just going to take Cam Ward. So their next biggest need is edge rusher. So let's just say they're taking Cam Ward with the first overall pick. Early day 2, the best option for them, in my opinion, Donovan Ezeraku, who very well could go in round 1, but there is a shot he's there. Remember, they pick early round 2. That would be the ideal pick, a really good fit in their defensive scheme. Braden Swinson of LSU could be a round 2 or a round 3 guy. Again, the Titans don't have a third round pick, so they would have to do some maneuvering in this case, but it'd be a really good scheme fit. But Q Robinson's a guy in early day 3 I got my eye on. Really good fit as a 3-4 stand-up pass rusher. Didn't play a ton of snaps for Alabama, so that's kind of the concern. But, man, when he was on the field, he's explosive off the ball, getting after the quarterback. He stops the run fairly, reads the run fairly well. So, just very interesting that he had a limited number of snaps there at Alabama, but some good edge options for Tennessee. And Gavin Mallard on Twitter, who is a Titans guy, played along. He kind of gave some different options here. The Titans are a little tricky because we know they're going to go Cam Ward. We think they're going to go Cam Ward first overall. So, says receiver is something to look out for. Yeah, if Luther Burden is there early round 2, that's got to be the pick. But what if Donovan Ezeraku is there? And then he also said Braden Swinson, and he corrected himself on the misspelling. There was a typo on Twitter. But that is, seems like a really good fit. We can agree on that. So any Titans fans watching this, let me know your thoughts, biggest need, and the options there for them throughout the draft. Cleveland Browns, the biggest need's got to be quarterback. They have quite a few other needs. They may not go quarterback in round 1. You could argue Dart. I can make the case that Dart has more upside than Shedeur Sanders, but I think if they do go at the quarterback with the second overall pick, I think they're going to take Shedeur Sanders. So if they go quarterback. So I had to put him as the round 1 option. Jackson Dart is the early round 2 option. Maybe they have to trade up a little bit from their early second round pick. Say Quinn Ewers could be that late day 2 option, a third round pick perhaps for them. Everyone's going to be split on Ewers, more of a pro style quarterback at the next level. So that's great. I think he's pretty, ready in terms of understanding an offense. So that's also solid. He's a little up and down. He has some games where he's looked like a first-round quarterback, and there's a lot of games, especially down the stretch. But again, he was playing injured, that he looked like a fifth, sixth-round quarterback. So a little bit of mixture of things there. Does he have durability concerns? And I think an earlier day 3 guy could be Will Howard. So I think they would be looking for a guy that could step in, a smarter quarterback that's pretty accurate, that can step in and help them right now, because that's kind of what they need, maybe over Kenny Pickett. The only argument is Dart. I feel like best case for him is to sit and learn a little bit more, because it's quite the jump going from that Lane Kiffin offense to the NFL, but he is the best option if we're talking about possible guys in early round 2. The New York Giants, I got to go quarterback still. They added 2 quarterbacks, but they're most certainly not the answer, especially long term. So it is still a big need. This coaching staff, this front office cannot have a question at quarterback every offseason and expect to survive. So, again, the round 1 option's got to be Sanders, obviously. And, again, I could argue Dart maybe has more upside. I think Sanders is better today, perhaps. He's definitely a little more accurate, but Dart has a little bit more flashiness to him. But if the Giants were to take quarterback at 3, I think they'd be taking Sanders. So I felt like I had to put him there. And, again, Dart, do they have to trade up a little bit with their early second-round pick? Possibly, but they possibly can get him there. Kyle McCord is gaining some buzz around the NFL. Again, he was decent at Ohio State. He just didn't live up to expectations. But then, Will Howard maybe looked a little bit better, but also Chip Kelly was in there coaching that offense, and McCord lit it up for Syracuse this year. The ball comes out pretty early on time, pretty accurate. He's, he can sling the ball downfield, so he's gaining some buzz here. I think a lot of us, including myself, maybe in the past, have made a mistake of just thinking, well, he didn't really fully work out at Ohio State. Will Howard won a national championship game, so McCord has to be under him, but a little bit different of coaching, a little bit different, in terms of the offensive playbook. And McCord still played fairly well for Ohio State. If you kind of go back and look, he just didn't cut it as a national champion level, obviously. So maybe people sleeping on him. Maybe I was at one point as well. Could end up being a day 2 guy. Then Jalen Milroe could end up being a day 2 guy as well, but he has a lot of work to do as a passer, especially as a pocket passer in the NFL. So I could see him slipping through. I think a guy like Kyle McCord could be passing him perhaps. So that could be an option. At that point, if the Giants don't have a quarterback, they may go, let's get the athletic guy in there. If he has to play, we'll win on the ground and try to win in different ways and throw teams off. So we had a Giants fan play along. Riley, he thinks receiver is the biggest need, which you could argue that even though they have Neighbors and they have Slayton, but Slayton might be a high-end receiver 3. Travis Hunter, who they very well could take in the first round. That's who we had in our most recent mock. Trey Harris as an option around 2. I do like that. Something a little different than what they have had. They have Neighbors who can do-it-all type guy, very shifty, very athletic. And they have Slayton, who's kind of an outside speed guy, like down-the-field guy. And Trey Harris is more of your physical contested catch guy, but along the outside. But he can move for a guy that's kind of known as a contested, a high point the ball type of guy. And Savion Williams, who is a do-it-all type guy. Maybe an upgrade from in different body type than Wan'Dale Robinson, where it's kind of like a gadget guy, which the Dabo and the Giants love. So that would be maybe an upgrade with that element of their game. So some interesting takes there. New England Patriots, I definitely got to go with offensive tackle, even though maybe some people would argue a different position. Running back, they need another RB1 to pair with Stevenson. They added Diggs, so does that bump receiver down the biggest need list a little bit? But tackle, they added Morgan Moses for the right side, so good for now, but long-term still a question mark. Left tackle, definitely need a starter. Remember on when you played tackle for a little bit, he can play guard or tackle. So do they have a big plan there? I still think they're looking for the future left tackle, even though they do have a guy like Caden Wallace as well. Do they like him? We'll see. Will Campbell, not only a realistic pick at 4, it'd be a pretty solid one, even though he's a little bit lacking in the length department. He's got dominant tape going back to 2 years ago, not just this past year as well. That is a realistic and solid pick for them at 4. Ariante Ursary is known as that guy at the tackle position on day 2. Again, there's a little bit of a drop-off. He is known as that top guy. But Ozzie Trapelo from Boston College is kind of right there with him, and you may have to use, if you have to have him, you may have to use an earlier day 2 pick on him, but they could possibly get him if they move around a little bit, or they can get him early 3 is definitely a possibility as well. And he's more of a right tackle. So again, they could use left or right. For right now, mainly left, but for now in the future, you look at left and right. And Logan Brown, again, from Kansas, a right tackle option as well. So you kind of get a mixture of different things here, some solid quality options for them, in my opinion, in all different areas of the draft. And then we have Ian, a Patriots fan that filled in here. He has tackle as well. Will Campbell, if he can play tackle, we know he's a really good tackle. I know he's lacking length a little bit, so I'm going to list him as a tackle. I'm glad that the pro day he came in at 33 inches. That was a big win for him. Josh Connerly or Ursary. Yeah, I mean, Connerly, it's good to bring him up. What if he slides to early round 2? I don't see it happening, but it's a possibility. That would be a home run pick there. If not, Ursary is what Ian is saying. And then Emory Jones, as well. Yeah, he could be a... And I've kind of changed. I added the day 3 since I asked Twitter, for some, their thoughts here. But he could be a late day 2 or a early day 3 option. Some think he may end up playing guard as well, but a lengthy guy that could be the future right tackle for the Patriots if they were indeed to take him and have him learn behind Morgan Moses. The Jags, I'm going to go with receiver, even though I feel like that's not talked about enough, but they have Brian Thomas Jr. and they have other bodies, other guys that can play. Remember, they added De'Ami Brown, but are there legit starters, like full snaps along with Brian Thomas, level guys? Like, there's not, right? Gabe Davis is a disappointment. I think Parker Washington's more rotation, even though I like him. He's a little more rotation. So the round 1 option, would it be Matthew Golden or would it be Tetaroa McMillan? I'm going to go at McMillan here, and you could argue they already have that kind of, lengthier outside receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., but man, I'm watching McMillan on tape. I feel like he does his best work over the middle of the field, going across the middle of the field, catching the ball in traffic. You actually see him hit another gear. I feel like he's a 4-4 guy when watching him do that. But when he plays on the outside and just stays along the boundary, he looks like a 4-6 guy, right around where he ran in the 40 and the higher 4-5. So, but he does have the leaping and contested catch ability. And some people say, well, Mike Evans, he'll be the Mike Evans for Liam Coen. Well, I feel like they already have Brian Thomas for out there. But when I watch McMillan go across the middle of the field, even play in the slot, he actually had 100 or so snaps in the slot. I thought he was really solid. And Chris Godwin was with Liam Coen in Tampa, a very valuable slot receiver who's a little bit bigger of a body. He's not as lengthy as McMillan, but a little bigger of a guy as one of the better slot receivers in football. So it's making me think like they can use McMillan there, and they can still use McMillan on the outside with Brian Thomas on the opposite outside of the field. So that makes sense as a fit. I don't think he's going to go as early as where they pick at 5. Could they trade back? You could argue he's worthy of that pick, even though it doesn't sound like he's going to go there. Then early day 2, if they strictly just want to replace Christian Kirk, Luther Burden, who has first-round talent, but there's some people talking about his attitude, and he was really just used on gadget plays this year, even though he's shown he's more than that in the past. So he could slide a little bit, and that would be a home run pick early round 2. And then Ty Felton, one of my favorites in the class. It just feels like another speedy option to pair with Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's a round 2 guy, but you potentially could get him a little later. And again, if they want a big slot, Isaac Tesla on day 3 from Arkansas is a lengthy slot receiver with 0 drops this year, so a sure-handed guy. I think he's a little underrated, so that could be a good fit in their offense as well. The Raiders, a lot of big needs. It's tough to single one out. We got to go at running back here. They definitely need an RB1, and they very well could be taking one with the 6th overall pick in Ashton Jeanty. Been mocking that for a little bit. So if they don't, maybe they don't. It's not a guarantee. They take a different position then maybe. And then early round 2, got to go with one of the Ohio State guys with Chip Kelly there, but going to go Quinshon Judkins. Just the difference between him and Henderson, I think a little bit more physicality. I think he can handle a load on inside runs, a little bit better vision. So they could be looking for more of that ground and pound play style perhaps. So I went with Judkins. An option maybe in round 3, Dylan Sampson, I think would fit Kelly's offense as well. A sneaky solid pass protector at the same time of being explosive as a home run hitter. Then Trevor Etienne from Georgia could be that earlier day 3 option for that offense. But we can see them add a couple of running backs in this draft. The Jets, you can argue receiver is the biggest need, but they have some options. It's still a big need, but I'm going to go with offensive tackle. They need a right tackle that can start right now on top of Fashanu, kind of being they wanted to sit him at first because he's a little bit of a raw prospect, and then he got thrown in there, and then he got injured. So they need maybe more than just one offensive tackle, but in terms of a starter day 1, they're going to need a right tackle. Armand Membu, a realistic option there at pick 7. I do like Will Campbell a little bit better, but maybe it's a little bit more of a bonus that Membu fits in that right tackle spot a little bit better. And now day 2, Marcus Bowe from Purdue is an intriguing option here because a lot of people have him as an interior player, even though he played right tackle for Purdue, but because he's a little bit lacking, not severely, but a little bit lacking in the arm length department. I mean, he is lacking in that department, so teams, people, media, they want to move him inside. But when I watch him, he's good. He's a good right tackle. I like him at right tackle, but on top of that, his only weakness is more of the power rushers, have him struggle to anchor a little bit. So if you slide him to guard or center, he's going to go against stronger players. So I would prefer keeping him at right tackle, but a guy that could potentially play inside. Cameron Williams played right tackle for Texas, and he's a little hot and cold, a little raw, so maybe a guy that could sit, but if you're taking a guy around that range for right tackle, this would be your guy. And then Logan Brown, which you actually can argue is a better prospect than Cameron Williams. You could argue Williams is more upside, so you honestly could flip those, but I think just because of traits and upside, maybe Williams is a little more likely to go ahead of the Kansas guy, Logan Brown. Panthers are an interesting one because you can argue edge rusher, and it sounds like they may go defense early on, but receiver is a big need because their best receiver right now is Adam Thielen, who's still balling out, but he's a little older. Obviously, one more year left on his deal. How much longer is he going to be around? And that's your best receiver. Obviously, you have Coker, you have Leggett, you have other options, but you don't know what you're going to get from those guys for sure. Obviously they could be decent players. They have upside. You need someone else, and McMillan feels like a really good fit for them and could be the pick at 8. It's sounding less and less likely, but it's such a good fit for Canales' offense. A guy that can move around a bit, but a guy that could be that big body guy on the outside. I just see a really good pairing with Bryce Young there and Trey Harris from Ole Miss. I know maybe some fans would say Jaden Higgins from Iowa State they would prefer, but I like Harris a little bit more as long as he's healthy, but a solid outside receiver. And then Kyle Williams, also an outside receiver, but a little different. More of a speedy guy, super explosive, really good tracking the football. Could be another option for them. And if they get to early day 3, Alec Iomanor, a good contested catch, physical guy on the outside from Stanford. Some people really, really like him where he's a day 2 guy. I think it's a little early for me because he disappears at times. So I would prefer him more earlier day 3, in my opinion. But some solid options for the Panthers who will look to fill that hole at some point. Saints are a little tricky when picking one biggest need. You could say quarterback, but technically they have Carr and Rattler on the roster. And, given it being a weaker quarterback class, maybe they're just better off rolling with those guys, right? And you could argue tackle, depending on how much they like Penning going forward. Ramczyk, obviously, it's not looking great, obviously, with his injuries. So do they need a tackle badly to pair with Fuaga? You could argue that. I definitely think they can use another guard in there. Now, we're going to start with Will Campbell. And I like Will Campbell at tackle because he played that at a very, very high level. But it does not stop a team from taking him and going, hey, we're gonna put you at guard because that's what we need a little bit more. So if he's available, if the Saints move up a little bit, it's definitely possible. If he gets by the Patriots at 4, which he could go to, I have him going to the Patriots at 4, but if he gets, it's very possible for him to get by that. He could slide a little bit, and the Saints would take him and probably put him at left guard, but they could put him at left tackle, put Fuaga at right tackle, so you have some options there. Again, I am going to rank him and grade him as a tackle, but he could play guard at a very high level, most likely. Jonah Savaiinaea, actually another guy that played tackle, but I like him better as a guard. But again, a guy that can play guard for you, or he can play right tackle for you as well. Then Miles Frazier, LSU guard, who I think is being slept on, I like a lot. Could be a good scheme fit for Kellen Moore's offense. Then Jalen Rivers, another guy that's played tackle for Miami, but I think he'd be much better as a guard. And again, finding a guy with some versatility I think could be huge for the Saints because they have a little bit of a question mark at guard and tackle still, but it's not like every spot they have some legit options. It's not like they need 2 tackles or 2 guards, and they're set at center. It's just really health is the question there. But some solid interior options that also could play tackle for New Orleans. The Chicago Bears, actually debatable what the biggest need is. I could actually argue left tackle. It's pretty equal to running back. You could throw D tackle in there as well, in my opinion. It seems like in mock drafts, Bears fans kind of get upset with me for saying left tackle is a need, so let alone the biggest need. So I went with running back here. We had a couple Bears fans kind of play along. You went with edge, and then King went with offensive tackle, actually. So Bears fans, I think they need a left tackle. But running back, I mean, it's very important for Ben Johnson. I mean, look at the Lions. They were really good for several reasons, not just running back, but a dominant running back duo that Montgomery and Gibbs went together so perfectly. And Swift obviously can play. After that, Roschon Johnson, I think should be a little bit deeper down the depth chart, in my opinion. Just doesn't have that explosiveness that you look for. So Ben Johnson's going to be looking for a big-time running. Could he be looking for 2 for the future, as Swift may not be the guy, long-term. So round 1, I think best case would be Ashton Jeanty if he slipped to them. I almost put Amari and Hampton here just because I think Genty's going to go 6 to the Raiders. And if he gets by that, I think he could end up with the Saints at 9. But I guess it's certainly possible the Bears can get him at 10. I would not recommending trading up as they're sitting pretty with 2 round 2 picks. So don't trade up for a running back when there's a bunch of running backs there on day 2, So that wouldn't make sense, but there's still a possibility that Jeanty could be there at 10. I love Caleb Johnson actually as a fit for Ben Johnson's offense. An outside zone runner that can hit home runs. It also has some physicality to him. Seems like a really good fit. And then Jaden Blue of Texas, who has home run ability, pass catching ability, route running ability, could be that it would be a poor man's Jahmyr Gibbs, but that you can find later in round 3, perhaps. It seems like a guy for Ben Johnson's offense. And again, this could be a guy they take, even if imagine if they get Jeanty and they get Jaden Blue, and I mean, that would kind of feel like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit for Ben Johnson. And then Devin Neal, an explosive runner that could fit that zone offense in earlier on day 3. But KEU went with edge. He says James Pierce, Nick Scorton, and Jordan Birch are good options. Yeah, I could see them when do they take an edge? That's kind of the question. They have Montez Sweat and they paid Odengbo big money, so I don't expect them to take one early, or would make the Odengbo signing even more confusing, or it would mean maybe they don't like Sweat. I don't know if that's the case. So I think they'd be more of a day 2 or day 3, but I do think that Dennis Allen would like guys like Scorton and Birch. And then King says offense tackle Will Campbell. If he slipped to them, I'm not counting on it. Could they trade up for him? They'd be a really good left tackle for them, and then their offense line would look a lot more complete. Donovan Jackson, who played very well at tackle for Ohio State at the end there, but I do like much better at guard. And then Cameron Williams would be a little bit more of an upside guy if they grab someone maybe in round 3, we'll say. The 49ers, as talented as they are, they have some massive needs. I went with defensive tackle. It's debatable, but I went with defensive tackle just because it's non-existing what they have up front. Obviously, right now, they moved on from Hargrave, Collins, and it just wasn't cutting it as it was. So badly need a legit defense. Not just a defensive tackle, a legit one. I'm a big Walter Nolan fan. If he ended up with the Niners, which he very well could, playing in that defense under Robert Saleh, inside Nick Bosa, I think he'd be a star. So that would be fantastic. Joshua Farmer, who I'm also a fan of in early day 2, would make some sense. Vernon Broughton, another guy. I think he's right there at Farmer. I think he's a round 2 guy, but it's lack of chatter. I think he could be a late round 2, early to mid round 3 guy. And then Cam Horsley, Boston College sleeper, got a little length to him. So yeah, I went with guys for the most part, after Walter Nolan, that have the physical traits, like the length that the 49ers will be looking for, that Robert Saleh will be looking for in that defense, but they also have an explosive part to their game as well. So guys, I think the Niners will be looking for, they kind of fit their profile. And then Astronaut, who is a Niners fan and a Goat House Hall of Famer, longtime supporter, has said interior defense as well. So he's in agreement. Walter Nolan, Alfred Collins he has. So I had a different Texas defensive tackle in Broughton. He had Collins, Aeneas Peebles, all high motor, good to great run defenders. So they could value stopping the run a little bit more. So that's definitely, those are good options. Well, Alfred Collins is a stud stopping the run. He has to work on a little bit more other than that. But day 1, you're stopping the run at a much higher level. Peebles is very interesting. He's very, very, very much undersized, but he's so explosive, and he's really solid getting after the quarterback. So some good options there at the same position that I had for the 49ers. The Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to go with receiver, and there's some guys that really stand out as fits that I also like for Dallas. I think if they went receiver, they could go with McMillan, but I think they would go with the Matthew Golden type to pair with CeeDee Lamb, just more of the quick separator. Jalen Noel, early day 2, really good separator as well, explosive athlete, good route runner, home run type receiver ability. Isaiah Bond, another Texas kid that you can move around a bit. He can play outside, inside. Same with Golden, and another explosive athlete. And then Jimmy Horn Jr. of Colorado. It's just kind of the profile that I think Dallas is looking for, to kind of find a guy that what they thought they were getting from Brandon Cooks. Or he played fairly well for them. So just kind of trying to replace that type of player. So all these guys here kind of fit that mold. Seem like really good Dallas Cowboys fits. Miami Dolphins, pretty debatable on what their biggest need is. You can go D tackle, you can go offensive line. I just kind of wish I knew what their thoughts were on a guy like Patrick Paul, but you can go tackle, you can go guard, you can go corner. I want a D tackle. Again, Walter Nolan, one of my favorites in the class. He could be available around that part of the draft, somewhat earlier in first round. You take him if he's there. And then Tyleik Williams of Ohio State, really good run defender, really good at shedding blocks as well. Right now at D tackle, all they have, it feels like, is Zach Sealer. So, they have they need other options really badly. So that's why I want my D tackle. Vernon Broughton's just going to be my favorite guy. I think his talent says he could go as early round 2, but we're not hearing anything about him right now. So if it's very possible he's like a later to mid day 2 guy, and he's going to be my favorite option for all these teams pretty much as that that part of the draft. If he's there and you need a D tackle, you take that guy. It's extreme value, a lot of upside. Cam Jackson from Florida is a solid option on day 3. He's a little hot and cold on tape. 1 second I'm like, whoa, and then 1 second I'm like, totally turned off, but he's got the physical traits, and he's a really solid run stuffer that you can put at the nose tackle position, which the Dolphins could be looking for. Vitor, Dolphins fan, longtime supporter, filled in here. Offensive tackle with versatility to play guard. So I like the specific label there because or you can go vice versa. A guard, same thing. That would help because is Patrick Paul the guy out there? And then could they upgrade over Eichenberg at guard? Remember, they brought in James Daniels, which is fantastic. So Calvin Banks, a tackle that may have upside as a guard. And then Jonah Savaiinaea has played right tackle, but I see guard all day. Wyatt Millum, he's going to have to play guard. He played tackle pretty well, but lacking length, but has the ability to play tackle. And then Crenshaw, Dixon, or Charles Grant could be a little bit later. Crenshaw, Dixon, I think, would be more of a day 3 guy. Charles Grant, getting a lot of hype with the William & Mary offensive tackle, would be a good scheme fit just because he is an outside zone type guy. That's where he kind of stands out, is getting downfield, hitting those next level blocks up, down the field, I should say. And he's got freaky length. I still think he's very much a work in progress, and he's going to have to go against better competition. So people might be hyping him up a little bit too much, but could he be a later day 3 pick or day 2 pick? Certainly, in a good fit for the Miami Dolphins. So there's some good options there for them. Colts, it's got to be tight end Tyler Warren, or could it be Colson Love? I like Tyler Warren for that Shane Steichen offense, the physicality that he is. I think people are overthinking Warren right now. This is a big-time playmaker for them and just dominant, just purely dominant a lot of the time on a really good team too. Mason Taylor is that best option for anyone that needs a tight end on day 2. A lot of upside, just a smooth mover. Just got to add a little bit more strength, which I think he'll do. He's young, high upside prospect, so get in an NFL team and they'll add some strength. And Gunnar Helm seems like a good physical tight end option for them later on day 2. And then Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, really strong hands. He looked like a future early round 2 pick from 2023. Then he got injured, and it felt like he did lose a step this year, but still was solid. But he's so young, you think he can get that step back, and then boom, you got a good tight end and a steal in day 3, possibly, as long as he kind of gets back on track, even though he still played well for them this year. Falcons got to be edge rusher. A lot of options in round 1. It's going to be very interesting how these guys come off the board, but they bring in Jeff Ulbrich as their defensive coordinator, and what has he looked for from edge rushers over the years? They have to have the appropriate length, like the physical traits. They have to have some level of physicality. They have to be somewhat of an explosive athlete as well, but I think you start with length or the traits there. Shamar Stewart, everyone's kind of mixed on him. I know fans don't love him a lot. Traits and tape over stats, and that's where everyone should be at. I like Shamar Stewart. I think he end up like a Danielle Hunter. Remember, he was a no stats guy at LSU, but you can see he can play, and he's end up a star. So Stewart's my number 2 pass rusher in the class, and I'm actually pretty firm on that. Him behind, and that's considering Walker as a linebacker, and obviously Abdul Carter far and away the number 1. JT Tuimoloau, a really good option. We're going to see his name pop up for the edge needy teams a bit in this video because, to my opinion, he is that option on day 2. Unless one of those round 1 guys slip through. I think which guy could, maybe a Donovan Ezeraku, or character concerns on James Pierce. But if they do slip through, they're going to go very early round 2. So I think a really good fit here, Tuimoloau, and he is that best option in my opinion on day 2. And then Braden Swinson has length and explosive ability that maybe the Falcons would like there, a little bit. Could be a later round 2 or early round 3 pick. And then Savion Jones, the other LSU pass rusher, a little bit more physical, very lengthy, looked pretty good Senior Bowl as well. That could be one that interests them earlier on day 3. A big need off the edge for Atlanta. Cardinals, I'm going to go with guard. You kind of maybe want a guy with some versatility as well that could play tackle, because they could use a right tackle. But they need a receiver pretty badly. They've filled out the defense pretty nicely. They definitely could use more options on defense, though. But I'm going to go guard. Love Donovan Jackson for them. We know he fits. They brought in Ohio State's offensive line coach. I think this guy's a stud guard. I think he belongs in this range of the first round. And he also can play tackle at a pretty high level. Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona. You're going to see his name pop up a bit for me in this one. He's going to be one of the, unless a guy slips through, from the first round, he's going to be one of the better day 2 options at this position. He played right tackle very well. I think he could be a Pro Bowl level guard. So he kind of gives you that flexibility. He could start at guard for the Cardinals or right tackle. And Emory Jones, I'm going to list him as tackle because he played right tackle and he was a little hot and cold, but he has some really good moments. And he played right tackle for LSU, I should say. But there's a lot of talk about him playing guard. So could the Cardinals take him and they can use him at guard or right tackle? And then Caleb Rogers, who's played some tackle in his past as well from Texas Tech. I do like him better at guard, but he's a smooth mover. I think the Cardinals would really value that early day 3. Michael Landon, a Cardinals fan, filled in. He wants a stud defender, Pro Bowler type. So he's thinking got to take it early. Hopefully at edge or linebacker. So yeah, Jalen Walker fits that profile where I think he needs to play both. I think he's a better edge rusher than off-ball linebacker, but if you just stick him there full time, I think he's like a wild card, his like a Swiss Army knife, and I think that's what creates more off the edge for him. So I think he needs to be both, so it kind of fills out what Michael Landon was saying, the edge and linebacker. And he likes Jaden Higgins as a receiver option and Jonas Savaiinaea, who we talked about, as a guard/tackle option. So makes sense. Bengals, you definitely could argue a couple positions here. Edge, D-tackle. Even though they have a long list of names on their roster, they got to get better at that position. Corner, guard, you definitely could argue, but they got to go defense. And right now where things sit with the whole Trey Hendrickson situation and Sam Hubbard retiring, it's got to be edge, right? And it's debatable on who you go with in round 1. Who's going to be there? I don't think Shamar Stewart's going to be there. I like Stewart a lot. James Pierce makes a lot of sense for Al Golden's offense. A really speedy edge rusher that has production, but you can actually put him off ball. I don't expect that a ton, but he's pretty good there. But you can drop him in coverage, which Al Golden likes to blitz a bit. So I think they'll value that. That makes some sense there in round 1. Again, JT Tuimoloau, one of my favorites. He is to me, it's like the absolute, mostly everyone out there is going to disagree, but the absolute best guy on day 2, unless some day 1 guy slips through pretty far. This is the best option, and he's going to pop up a lot in the video because of that, because I'm kind of going off my opinion here. And he is very scheme versatile because he's played up and down. He can drop in coverage. He's physical. He can stop the run. He's very instinctive. He's a pass deflection machine. He wins with power. He's a little bit more explosive than people give him credit for. There's a lot of times where he's kind of sitting and reading where he knows the play or he's dropping coverage, so he's not purposely not being explosive on those plays. Josiah Stewart, a little undersized from Michigan, but another guy that can drop in coverage, and he's pretty physical even though he's undersized. It's really not a power issue at all. It's more of he's short, right? But I didn't know they would use him dropping coverage a little bit. And Ashton Jaloti from Louisville is a little undersized, but really good speed to power, really good get off, pretty productive, and Al Golden's got to look at him while Notre Dame has played Louisville over the years as well. So a sneaky, he's somewhat of a sleeper right now, but he's going to be an early day 3. I wouldn't put it past him to go late day 2. And then we had a Bengals fan fill in. Brandon Wallner says he filled out a few needs. As good as the Bengals are, they have some needs, and it's defense, like we said, defense and interior offense line. He has James Pierce as well. Omar Norman Lott, another Tennessee Volunteer, and then Tate Ratledge. So Norman Lott is an interesting one. I think he's getting a little bit too much hype right now. The analytics favor him in the passing game. He is explosive getting after the quarterback, but Tennessee did not want to use him on obvious running downs. They only wanted to use him on obvious passing downs. When they did use him on running downs, he got bullied. So when he was in, he did his game. He's rushing the quarterback from the interior. He's good at it, but he knew he did not have to read run. He went straight after the quarterback, so that would result in the pressure rate needing to be high for him. So that's my opinion there, a little undersized when it comes to power. So I actually think later day 2 or early day 3 makes some sense. Some people talk about him like earlier day 2. I think a little bit too much hype, but he is unique on the pass rushing downs. And the Tate Ratledge would be a really solid guard option. We'll be mentioning him with some teams coming up. Really solid guard option for the Bengals and would be a day one starter for them no matter where they got him. Seattle Seahawks, it's got to be interior offensive line. If we had to pick guard or center, guard's a little bit more important, so we'll go that route. I'm going to go Donovan Jackson. We'll see his name pop up a bit because he's actually my favorite guard in the class. I think very highly of him, and he can play tackle if you need him to. If Will Campbell ends up playing guard for a team, then he'll be my favorite guard in the class, but I like him as a tackle. Marcus Bowe, again, we talked about it with the Jets. I actually like him better at tackle just because he was a really solid right tackle, and the only thing he really struggles with is power, so could he have more struggles if you move him inside? But I think more teams will probably like him a little bit more inside, and there's some talk about him playing guard or center. Seahawks need both, and Abe Lucas has had some injuries at the right tackle spot, so he can fill in there, so I thought that made some sense. Tate Ratledge would be a plug-and-play starter, the guard out of Georgia. And then Joshua Gray from Oregon State is one that stands out as an early day, or somewhat of an early, maybe mid-day 3 pick, a smooth mover. I think the Seahawks will really value that in their new blocking scheme under Clint Kubiak. Buccaneers, I'm going to go with edge. You could go linebacker. You could go corner today. They still have, obviously, McCollum for the long run, but Dean on the roster as well. You could argue those positions, and they did add Hassan Reddick, and I do like me some Yaya Diaby, but they need someone else here. Diaby dealing with some injuries last year. Reddick's not a long-term option. They just need to be better off the edge. They need to be more productive. They got to get someone that's more consistent getting after the quarterback. I'm going to go Mike Green. I like James Pierce for them as well. Again, I think Shamar Stewart will be off the board by this point. Jalen Walker probably off the board at this point. I'll go Mike Green. I know the Buccaneers always value stopping the run, which is something I love about them. Mike Green stops the run pretty well off the edge. And there's a guy that does that, and he gets production. Got some nasty pass rush moves. Green's tape is a little bit of a roller coaster. I mean, he'll go like plays and plays showing his size, unfortunately, like kind of getting bullied, but then he'll just have plays and plays of just like insane get off with insane moves to get after the quarterback and then getting the quarterback. So I think the Bucs will like him. And then there's my favorite day 2 guy in JT Tuimoloau, scheme versatile, so he can fit Todd Bowles' scheme here. Could drop in coverage if you need him to. Very good at that. Josiah Stewart, a guy that can drop in coverage because, again, the Bucs will blitz a little bit, so that getting a guy that could drop off the edge could be valuable to them. Not that they'll have him do it a ton, but a physical guy off the edge, a smart player. And then Q Robinson could be their option for early day 3, I should say. We talked about one of the Titans. He's a unique one because he didn't get a ton of snaps, but when he was on the field, he looked pretty damn good. Like explosive, gets after the quarterback, stops the run. So he's a very intriguing prospect, but some good fits for Tampa here. Broncos got to go running back here, even though you could say maybe receiver as well. But I think Omarion Hampton would be best case in round 1. Huge Hampton fan, have been for a while. If he's there, that's got to be that guy. I think they'll like Travion Henderson. I think Sean Payton will like him enough to take him in the first round. I feel a little more comfortable on day 2 with him. He's super explosive. He is lacking vision a little bit, which is a big thing, but he makes up for it if he doesn't see the right hole. Sometimes he'll run into contact, run into his own offensive lineman, but he's so damn explosive and a threat always running and passing game. But a really good fit. I would like that for the Broncos in round 2. RJ Harvey, I really considered putting Jaden Blue here, but I like Harvey, home run guy, explosive guy. You can run a little wildcat with him. I think Sean Payton would like him. And a day 3 option that has Sean Payton written all over him is Brashard Smith, who is another very intriguing prospect because he was a receiver for SMU and they turned him into a running back. So obviously they didn't like him enough at receiver, and he was pretty good at running back, but he's severely undersized and does kind of rely on his quickness and speed at times, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield, downfield with that receiver background. But it's a guy that's going to be a gadget guy, a rotation guy at first. So I think the best case is Devon Achane. I mean, he's probably not going to reach that ceiling in my opinion, but that's the type of player he is. Just feels like a guy that Sean Payton would really like. And then Fennec, Broncos fan, longtime supporter, has filled in. He has quite a few needs. First round, Tetairoa McMillan, if he falls. I do love that fit. He really, I don't see anyone else saying it, but I feel like he's Michael Thomas. That's another Michael Thomas type guy, where it's a big body guy, but he can do everything, but he's especially good going across the middle of the field. If you want to get specific, dominant slant guy, drag routes, and Sean Payton coach Michael Thomas. So I do love that fit. Otherwise, Burden, who would fill in the slot for them. A second round, one of the Ohio State backs, whichever falls, preferably Henderson. I like Judkins a little better, but for Sean Payton's offense, yeah, Henderson, I think actually makes a little bit more sense. Third round, Devin Neal, or I actually originally had Devin Neal for the day 3, but I'm like, oh, I got to go Brashard Smith here. And I thought about Jaden Blue again in that RJ Harvey spot. Broncos are fun when it comes to the running backs. Devin Neal, Tej Johnson's a good fit. Is Bo Nix, his brother, actually, he played with them, so that's fantastic. Isaiah Bond. So a lot of options here. Luke Lackey as well, and so they have a few needs that he mentioned: running back, receiver, tight end. But if they could fill those with the right pieces that fit that offense, I think the Broncos could really look like a very complete roster. Steelers, I want to put defensive tackle here, but as we sit, it's definitely quarterback. We don't know we never know what Rodgers is up to. I mean, if one day it feels like he's for sure going to be a Steeler, and then it's like, no, he's not. I don't know. But right now it's quarterback. They have a later round 1 pick. I think a realistic pick and a decent one would be Jackson Dart. Maybe you would have to start right away, though. I like Dart a lot. I like his upside. I feel like he has to sit right away. Quinn Ewers, and they don't have a round 2 pick, so keep that in mind. So Quinn Ewers and Kyle McCord are kind of in the same boat here. You could flip them, but those are options I think could come in and start right away for them. And then Will Howard could be that earlier day 3 guy. I'm not buying the Jalen Milroe smoke. It keeps getting thrown in our face. The Steelers love Jalen Milroe so much. It just feels like obvious smoke. On top of that, Milroe is a poor man's Justin Fields, and Justin Fields is not. He's a poor man's someone else, right? So, and they could have had Fields back. They had a limit on how much they would pay him. So why would they turn around and then take Milroe like that type of? I don't think they really want that type of quarterback. I just don't think so. I think they want a guy that could be more of a pocket pass, be more of a pro style. So I'm not falling for it. You can throw Tyler Shuck in here somewhere as well if you'd like. I do like that McCord fit. They could even take him early, either trade up and take him, or maneuver a little bit, trade back with the round 1, trade up with the round 2, target a guy like McCord. I could totally see it. We'll see what ends up happening with Rodgers. But even with Rodgers, they definitely probably need another quarterback still. Chargers, even though you can go with receiver, maybe tight end, you got to go defensive tackle. They're pretty brutal on paper right now on the interior defensive line. Kenneth Grant would be an A-plus scenario, and it's one of these first-round defensive tackles has to slide a little bit. Could it be him? Obviously familiar with Harbaugh from the Michigan days, would give him a big-time presence on the inside there. Tyleik Williams of Ohio State, kind of the round 2 version of Kenneth Grant. Harbaugh can think highly of these Big Ten guys. With a little bit different style defensive tackle in Shamar Turner from Texas A&M, so don't get confused with Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher. But Turner, a little bit of a tweener because of his weight, a little under 290. He's explosive. He has athletic, explosive traits. Could be a guy that this defense wants to work with. A lot of upside. And then Riley Mills from Notre Dame in day 3. If he wasn't coming off a bad knee injury, be a day 2 guy, but he's explosive. He gets after the quarterback. Good mixture of power and athleticism. Chargers been, even with the staff change, before the staff change, it feels like they've been drafting some Notre Dame players quite a bit. So there's an option there on day 3. The Green Bay Packers, a tough one to pick the biggest need because you could go defensive tackle, you could go receiver. I'm going to go edge, specifically a guy that gets to the quarterback consistently, gets production consistently. They have players that can play off the edge, led by Rashawn Gary. Again, I keep saying consistency, but that's what they need more of in terms of not just getting pressure, hitting the quarterback, getting them down. So, very interesting one here with Donovan Ezeraku, the Boston College pass rusher, because it's probably debatable. Because the Packers switched to more of a 4-3 base defense last year, and Ezeraku could play either, but he does feel like more of a 3-4 edge rusher. But his head coach for a few years is the Packers defense coordinator and was last year as well in Hafley. So, I think and he's a guy that got production. He got after the quarterback, and he played in the ACC. It wasn't the best competition, but it's considered solid college football competition. So I could totally see that one. I'm surprised it's not talked about more. I'm surprised I haven't touched on that more, just because the Boston College connection there. And then more of the prototypical 4-3 end there in the second round, Nick Scorton, who was a little bit better with Purdue than he was with A&M. But a very solid day 2 pass rusher. And then Kyle Kennard, who is an explosive pass rusher from South Carolina. Love the first step. Love how he explodes off the ball. He could use a little bit more power, a little more strength, because he could get pushed around a bit. But another guy, gets production. He's explosive. A guy like Scorton didn't have a ton of production this year, but he did with Purdue. And then Jordan Birch, who was with Oregon this past year. You have more of your prototypical 4-3 end that could go late day 2, but could end up being a really good pick early day 3. Dylan Harp, a Packers fan, filled in. Biggest need, could argue true number 1 receiver or defensive back. Those are good. You could argue that as well. Matthew Golden or Jahdae Barron in round 1. Some Texas guys. Those would be, if Golden slips through, I don't think either of those guys are going to be there. Do they trade up a little bit? If they do slip through, you never know at the draft. It's always mysterious. If they do slip through, those would be fantastic picks for Green Bay. And then he's asking about past round 1. Likes Jack Besh, sure-handed guy. He could play in the slot, play outside. Could he be their number 1 receiver if they get him on day 2, he asks. Yeah, definitely, with the guy, they have good players at receiver. That's kind of the Packers roster. You're looking at edge and receiver. Like, they have guys that can play. It's just they desperately need a number 1, though. So that's kind of where they're at right now. So an interesting team to watch on draft weekend. The Vikings, I'm going to go with guard, specifically left guard, but even more specific, I touched on this before. If they can get a guy that has some versatility, that'd be fantastic. Donovan Jackson is my favorite guard in the class. This would be a home run for Minnesota. And some people talk about him being a round 2 guy, so I guess it's certainly possible. And he'd start at left guard for them, exactly what they need. And he played very well at left tackle for Ohio State in the playoffs down the stretch. And Darisaw has had some past injuries, so he could fill in there. So that's perfect. The Vikings don't have a second-round pick. In fact, they don't pick until late round 3, so it makes us a little tough. But Tate Ratledge from Georgia would be a plug-and-play guy. Wyatt Millum from West Virginia, who has tackle experience but is going to be a left guard at the next level. And another Georgia guy, Dylan Fairchild, who's not being talked about at all. He's a big-time day 3 sleeper. I think he's fairly solid. He's not as good as his teammate Ratledge, but I don't think there's that much of a difference between the two. It's almost like people are talking like they're way different, but that would be a solid option that could start for them, if they grab him in day 3. So then Paskey, a Vikings fan, says guard, but could end up going Malachi Starks, a guy like that. Yeah, safety's a bit of a need as well. Harrison Smith, 1 more year left probably. I think he thought about retiring this past year. They did bring back Theo Jackson. He filled in for Harrison Smith when he's injured, looked pretty solid, but they have both of them out there. And then Metellus is a kind of a safety linebacker hybrid, plays a little bit of both. They need more of a playmaker in the back end probably. Which again, Smith is versatile enough to do that. Theo Jackson possibly as well, but could they go with a guy like Starks? My safety rankings, we didn't get there yet, but they're going to be a lot different than the consensus. So I could argue maybe Watts or Makuba for the Vikings. He has Ratledge as well. And then CJ West, they could use another defensive tackle. He's a very undersized but pretty smooth, explosive guy in the interior there from Indiana. So, some solid options there. The Houston Texans, you could argue offensive tackle or guard because they recently added multiple offensive tackles, adding Cam Robinson and Trent Brown. So it may look like they have more holes at guard, but one, those guys are 1-year deals. They're not long-term answers. Trent Brown's, you hate to say it, but he's probably going to get injured looking at what history shows. And then they have a lot of, in my opinion, it's fact with Titus Howard, they have a lot of tackles that could play guard, and Howard, they move there and could end up being better at guard. And then they have a guy like Blake Fisher, who they drafted from Notre Dame a year ago. I felt that he had more upside at guard, but can play tackle. So could they move him? So therefore, I'll go with offensive tackle, a little bit more important here. Josh Simmons or Josh Connerly. I like Simmons. Not that he played with Stroud, but Ohio State background. He can play left or right. His experience at both. Very athletic tackle. Ariante Ursary is that top option at tackle in day 2, unless someone else falls through. And then Ozzie Trapelo is kind of right with him. He could end up being earlier picked than late day 2, but an option. He would probably start at right tackle for them if they took him. And then Charles Grant, who's an athletic, lengthy, high upside. Maybe you don't want him to start right away, so that'd be good. He could sit behind one of the veteran tackles, but a high upside tackle. Then Big Ounce, longtime supporter, is a Texans fan, and he says guard, so kind of I had a debate with myself there. He went with Donovan Jackson, who is my favorite guard in the class from Ohio State, could also play tackle, so that'd be a great pick. Wyatt Millum, who's a guard that also has played, well, he's actually been a tackle, but he's going to be a guard, but he also could play tackle. And then Miles Frazier, who I'm a fan of, the LSU guard, a physical blocker in both as a pass protector and in the run game, I should say. So, yeah, kind of similar thoughts, even though I'm glad he kind of went with guard, so you kind of could see both there. So it's always good to get the fans' perspectives as well. Rams, even though they have not valued it at all, linebacker is a desperate need. I'll go Jihad Campbell in the first round, could be that option. The Alabama linebacker that also could be a pass rusher. Danny Stutzman, I think he's kind of one of a kind in this class where there's not too many guys that are physical, downhill, smart gap fillers in the run game, sure tacklers, and that Stutzman kind of fills that box, and that's what the Rams need. The run defense has been so poor, and they got good defensive linemen up front. So, and they add Poona Ford, so you get those linebackers. Chris Paul Jr. feels like a guy the Rams wouldn't be afraid to add, even though he's a little undersized. But he's another guy. He kind of just does it right. He's a safe pick. It's just really he's undersized. Like he does what you ask from a linebacker. He's a guy that can get downhill. He's smart filling gaps. He's not going to lay huge hits. But he can cover as well. And then Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame could be a early round, day 3 option as well, which we'll see what Rams we get from the Rams. They might just wait because they don't value the position that much, or they might finally value it and take one early. We will see. Ravens, I'm going to go with guard. They're a little thin at the guard position right now. Tyler Booker is an excellent round 1 option, a physical blocker from Alabama. Miles Frazier, again, he could be a later day 2 option for some teams, but the Ravens will be picking later in the round. So I do like the LSU guard. That would be a really good scheme fit for the Ravens. Wyatt Millum could be an option. The West Virginia tackle, but he's going to play guard. Got a good level of physicality, and the Ravens will like. And then Jalen Rivers also was a tackle, but I think he's going to end up playing guard, the Miami prospect there. A couple Ravens fans played along. Yickham says wide receiver. Ted McMillan, what if he just keeps slipping through? It's a talk right now. What if he keeps slipping through? They can grab him. I mean, the Ravens do use 2 receivers out there a lot. You're never going to really see them with 3 receivers out there at once, and they did add DeAndre Hopkins on top of Flowers and Bateman. So I don't know if they'll take a receiver that early. Higgins from Iowa State and Io Manor from Stanford could be some options. So he wants kind of a physical outside receiver. And then Tremor Pulse says guard and edge. So he has Tyler Booker as well. Braden Swinson would be a pretty good fit. The LSU explosive pass rusher. And I do like Jonah Savai-Naya for them, the Arizona right tackle. That's probably, in my opinion, could be a very high-end guard, the next level. Are they in a position to get him? Possibly. You could put him in that early day 2 spot. So that's a good that he mentioned him as well as a solid fit for the Ravens. The Lions, it's got to be edge. It almost feels like they're an edge rusher and staying healthy away from being that top Super Bowl team, perhaps. Mike Green, I'll go with. Just seems like a guy that can continue his production in this scheme with this defense on the Lions. And he's a guy that can go early round 1 or late because he's a little undersized. It does show at times on tape. A little bit of roller coaster ride on tape, just like elite moments. And then, he's undersized, he's getting bullied, those types of moments. JT Tuimoloau, my favorite day 2 option, fits any scheme, just feels like a Lions type of defensive end, would be a great fit. Landon Jackson, some people talk about him as an early day 2. I think it's a little early, but he has grown on me a little bit. He is an athlete. He's lengthy. He's explosive. Just feels like a guy the Lions would really like. And then Jared Ivey, a physical defensive end from Ole Miss on day 3. I've heard some bold takes that people really, really like him. People are kind of mixed on him. He's a little too patient in his rush, a little, doesn't really explode off the ball for my liking earlier than that range, but it could be a Lions guy on earlier day 3. Cameron Sullivan, longtime supporter and Goathouse Hall of Famer, says edge. I think, everyone's kind of got to agree there. James Pierce or Mike Green, he kind of mentions like a trade up. I think it's certainly possible for the Lions because they don't have a ton of needs. They can go up and get the guy they want. If they can go up and get a guy like Shamar Stewart, I'd be thrilled with the Lions there, even though I'm not a huge trade-up guy, but in that case, I would be. And then round 2, JT Tuimoloau, I think he's got to be that day 2 option for all these edge-needed teams unless somebody slips through. And then Josiah Stewart, who is a little undersized, but he's powerful. I love he's got one of the best explosive get-offs in the class, which I love. And he could drop in coverage. You can align him different ways, so he's kind of a likable guy, even though, the problem is, like, he's like 6 feet, 6'1", maybe maximum, and you look at all the best, not just the best of the best pass rushers in the NFL, they're all like literally 6'4", and there's some 6'3" guys there, 6'4", you get some 6'5" guys, but it seems to be the sweet spot with the height, but he plays a lot bigger than he is, and the tape, you take away the size, you could argue is like an early round 2 guy in terms of just pure talent. So likable guy there for sure. Commanders got to go with edge, even though you can say corner or some other positions as well. I'll go James Pierce Jr. Could go Mike Green, but I'll go James Pierce. Super athletic, speedy pass rusher that could even play off ball and drop in coverage, sit in the middle of the field and cover if you want him to. It just feels like a poor man's Micah Parsons for Dan Quinn here and the Commanders. So I thought James Pierce kind of made some sense. JT Tuimoloau, one of my favorite players in the draft. As you can tell, obviously you guys know by now my favorite day 2 edge rush prospect, can fit any scheme. He's a very smart, instinctive pass rusher, can win with power, which you can't really say about a lot of pass rushers in this class. And Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss, a strider, wins with his strides, pretty physical and long as well. And then Femi Oladeo from UCLA, an off-ball linebacker turned edge rusher. He's not Micah Parsons, not even close, but it kind of sounds like that, right? That's the beauty with Dan Quinn, and when he's looking for an edge rusher, he anything kind of can fit what he's looking for. He kind of likes those hybrid guys that are super athletic, super explosive, but he kind of likes your traditional defensive ends, like the second 2 that I said, that are pretty lengthy and strong at the same time. So they badly need an edge rusher. I think they kind of held out the trade for Trey Hendrickson. I guess it could still happen, but they're going to need some guys in the draft here, at least one big-time guy. Bills got to go with corner, need someone to pair with Benford on the outside, Trey Amos. My top corners are Will Johnson and Barron at the top. Those guys are going to go much earlier than the Bills pick. And then it's Amos. And then for me, it's Revel and Morrison. And that's where it becomes interesting here. Revel and Morrison, to me, are both actually, on tape at least, they have shown some round 1 talent for sure. But they're both coming off injuries. With the other corners, like, where do you take that? You could take them late round 1. But I do like Amos a lot. He's a round 1 player for me. And the Bills, used to be a lot of, a cover 2, but they ran a bit more cover 3, even a little bit more man last year. They geared towards running more of that, but I do like Amos in cover 3, so it kind of helps them do a little bit more. And then Morrison would be a solid fit. He could slip because of the injury. You could put Revel here as well. I think he'll definitely be gone by this point. They do have 2 late round 2 picks. Denzel Burke seems like a really solid fit later on day 3. He could even be an later day 2. He could, I was going to say round 3. But it could end up being an earlier day 3 pick. I'm confusing myself here. But he's a cover 2 guy to me. You don't want him playing a lot of man coverage. And the Bills have always had a thing for cover 2, and it just depends on where they're trying to go. But cover 2 type corners, I think he really could thrive in that type of scheme. He's really good downhill, really good tackling, really good covering underneath, and he can press. I prefer to press in cover 2 schemes. I want teams to think I'm in man and try to take a shot down the field, and then you have a split safety help over the top, interception. So I love press cover 2. You got to do it right, though, and I think Burke could be that guy. And then Caleb Ransaw, a little bit of a sleeper corner from Tulane, very athletic, and he's a guy that gets downhill. He'll tackle. I think the Bills will value that. And then Eric Bouncel, longtime supporter, has corner as well, and he has Amos as well. I wonder if the Bills will view him as a fit. I was kind of wondering that, but it can help them kind of do more. And then Azareye'h Thomas, who's kind of purely a man coverage corner, but the Bills, they want to do more. They don't want to be stuck in that cover 2 like they were under Leslie Frazier. They kind of went outside the box a little bit more last year. So could they add a guy like Azareye'h Thomas from Florida State to be able to do more as a really good man coverage corner, but doesn't have the top end speed you look for in a very good man coverage corner, but his tape is really good. And then Kobe Bryant, who is a lot of fun from Kansas. He's super thin, but he's a playmaker. He went against some good receivers, and he held his own against them. He could be a late day 2 or an early day 3. I like that one for the Bills. That's a good one there. So yeah, corner, a big need, but you could put edge, you could put D tackle, you could put safety in here, and it's very, very interesting situation with James Cook right now. I don't know if the Bills will pay up to what he wants. We're kind of getting off topic, but I did want to touch on that. But ride with him for now. I mean, he was a big-time running back last year, but I like Ray Davis, what I saw from him. I think he can be their future running back one if they do not pay Cook, but it's hard not to pay a running back the level of James Cook. But my point is they'll be adding a running back at some point, I think. But even though they have a number of guys on their roster that can play, I think they'll probably later. They could be kind of sneaky adding a guy that could help out in the future. Chiefs, debatable here. You go offensive tackle or you can go guard. Right now, since they added Jalen Moore, you could argue left guard, and they traded Joe Thuney. I'm still going to go tackle. Nothing guaranteed with Moore there. They know that's a little more important, and they just need to make sure that is ready to go to be able to win the Super Bowl. So maybe Kelvin Banks could slip through. Some teams will value more as a guard than a tackle. Some of the other tackles are a little flashier, maybe a little more upside, so he could slip a little bit. Maybe the Chiefs, why not trade up, make sure you get a legit left tackle, again, or he could play left guard. Anthony Belton, I like his physicality. The NC State tackle played fairly well against Tennessee, which was pretty good to have on tape. The Chiefs could definitely a possibility they grab him with their late round 2 pick. Cameron Williams, yeah, more of a right tackle, but once you get to later day 2, it's like, yeah, we're going to take upside guys. I think the Chiefs, like a certain level of physicality from their tackles as well. Then Holland Pierce, Rutgers, big tank, physical tackle could be a day 3 option for Kansas City. In the Eagles, I'm going to go defensive tackle. I guess you could argue corner, safety, guard. I like, or edge. I like defensive tackle as their biggest need. They got to try to replace Milton Williams. It doesn't have to be the exact same style, but get another body in there because Jordan Davis, actually, even as good as he is not an every single down defensive tackle. So you actually might need a starter or a guy for passing downs that plays a lot. So this is tricky because they pick very late round 1. Which guy is most likely to slip through? Grant or Harmon? I actually think Grant could be a little better version of Jordan Davis, but they already have that type of defensive tackle, so maybe they'd be more likely to go Harmon. They have a lot of picks. Could they trade up? Is there a day 2 guy that they can pick with them? The 32nd pick is basically day 2. So can they pick a day 2 guy with that pick? Certainly, I would look at a guy like Joshua Farmer. So I almost want to put Farmer in that spot if they don't trade up. And then early day 2, again, I like Farmer for them, but let's late day 2. Darius Alexander from Toledo seems like a really good fit. He can slip a little bit down to them, and even though he's better than a late round 2 guy in terms of talent because he's a little bit older of a prospect, going to be 24. But he's explosive. He's explosive, kind of a playmaker as well from Toledo. Vernon Broughton is my favorite guy that could potentially be a steal. I mean, again, I keep saying he could go where he should go earlier round 2. Then maybe it's not a steal, but not a lot of chat around him. He could end up being a steal later on day 2. Has the traits the Eagles look for. He's explosive. I think he'd be damn good with them. And then Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee is an explosive pass rush specialist from the interior. He definitely, that's a problem with him. He couldn't be on the field against the run, only in obvious passing downs. But it'd be a good situation, where Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis start. He comes in on obvious passing downs, and they really know how to develop the defensive tackles. It'd be a good situation for him. I think he could be very well could be a late day 2 pick. Some people are a little too high on him, but he's kind of just a situational guy. So therefore, late day 2, early day 3 makes a lot of sense for me on him. So I don't want to get too hyped on a player like that. But that wraps it up for this one. This is a super long video, yeah, it was a lot of fun doing this one. I was glad a lot of people were able to kind of play along. But that's going to do it. Like, subscribe to notifications on. We'll be live during day 1 of the NFL draft right here. Hopefully you can join us. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.